Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Ducksy Gaming and the last series on the channel before the next league. I had a few comments in the Delhi Everywhere video suggesting that my skill selection, i.e. Tornado Shot, was the reason I found it tough, and that even league starting TS is not really very viable. Now I already know it's not true because I've league started it recently and it was absolutely fine. Is it the easiest? No. Is it going to compete with the meta builds? No. But it's got a massive fun factor, good clear speed in spades, and it's what I aim for in a build. So I've just finished a campaign. So this first video is going to talk through the skill tree act by act, what skills to use, and talk about when I switched to Tornado Shot and why, and what I recommend you do. So before we jump into the details, I always get comments on a lot of my bow videos saying that I'm making a mistake not leveling with Caustic Arrow and Toxic Rain, as the DPS is better and you don't need any gear. I don't know if this is just from people that haven't leveled it recently, but from my experience, Toxic Rain and Caustic Arrow massively struggles with DPS later on, and then you've still got your respec to do when you get into map. So it is less gear dependent, but to me it really lags behind since Precise Technique got added to the tree. You can get some absolutely insane damage from attack-based builds, but your dot on Toxic Rain is not affected by things like Precise Technique and Point Blank. So I did start the run with that setup. I went Axe 1 to 5 using Toxic Rain, Ballistas and Toxic Rain self-cast, and I noticed already by Act 4 the single target damage was struggling, and I'd taken nearly every damage over time and bow node I could take. The main problem with these skills is that there's not really any gear you can get that will help. There's not really any bows you're going to pick up unless you get super lucky that's going to have any damage over time on it. And then the last problem is, to be effective, you have to deviate really far from your Ellie bow tree and the gems that you switch over to at the end as well. So you then have to start leveling lots of gems up in offhands, and it just becomes a hassle when I genuinely think attack leveling is superior to dot leveling, but you are free to level however you like. But with that out of the way, let's talk about the way I leveled the character. So in Act 1, you either use Caustic Arrow or Galvanic Arrow, and then you link that to Mirage Archer. If you get a third link, you can add Onslaught or Added Cold into your Galvanic, or you can add Void Manipulation into your Caustic Arrow. You want to supplement this with a Shrapnel Ballista. If you can fit a damage support in, great. Anything works, like Chance to Bleed, Added Cold, anything that adds damage really will work for your Shrapnel Ballista. At level 12, you want to take Rain of Arrows. The 3 link I used was Mirage Archer, Onslaught, Rain of Arrows, but you're kind of lacking a bit of DPS with this. So I would recommend, even though you lose a bit of speed, dropping the Onslaught and running Rain of Arrows, Added Cold, and Mirage Archer. Then you can run a second Ballista. So you can get Ballista support with any gem that you like. I just ran a Lightning Arrow because it's quite good single target. I did try running Lightning Arrow instead of Rain of Arrows, but I found that you need LMP in it for it to feel good. Otherwise, it's just very hard to hit your target, especially when they move. And that just lowers the DPS too much. So on a 3 link, I don't think it's viable. And I would stick with Rain of Arrows. To be honest, I would stick with Rain of Arrows through the whole campaign, which we'll come on to in a moment. So in Act 2, you're going to take both Precise Technique and Point Blank, and from here your damage should be really, really juicy. You want to run yourself a low level precision at this point, just to make sure your accuracy stays above your life, and then take Herald of Ice and Blood Rage. When you get to the bandits, you want to kill all of them and take the passive points. Once you get towards Act 3 and 4, your 4 link goal for Rain of Arrows is going to be something like Rain of Arrows, Added Cold, Trinity, and Ellie damage with attacks. To get this to work, you're probably going to need a bow with 2 Ellie rolls so that you can make sure Trinity procs. If you can't drop Trinity, then don't look for that color setup, look for something else. But any support gems that do damage, like Inspiration, Ellie damage, Added Cold, Added Lightning, anything like that works. Even faster attacks, if you had to, will work. Your Ballista, any support that adds damage, because you don't really want to be stuck into 2 specific colored 4 links, because it can be hard to then get gear upgrades. So you want Ballista, and then you want whatever skills in your Ballista. Let's say it's Lightning Arrow, and then you want either Added Cold, Ellie damage. You could run Inspiration, Added Lightning again. Just any damage support will work. Again, faster attacks as a worst case scenario will work. Once you get to Act 3, equip the aura of your choice. At this stage, I like to drop Herald of Ice and run Anger, as it can help Trinity. If your fire damage becomes too much at any point, you could drop Anger for haste, as the DPS is pretty similar, and it will just bring your fire damage back down to hopefully be able to keep proccing Trinity. You can also equip Sniper's Mark in Act 3, and then add a mark on hit to it in Act 4. Now, just to test it, I switched to Tornado Shot as soon as GMP become available. I would never even consider running it before you get that, because you need the projectiles. So I went GMP as my supports, along with LE damage with attacks and Trinity. Now, I wouldn't recommend this. The single target was actually really, really good and better than any of the other bow skills that I've tried leveling with, but clear is pretty janky at this moment because we have no chain and we have no extra projectiles. So I would stick with Rain of Arrows, and then I would switch to either Lightning Arrow or Tornado Shot when you get your 5-link. But if you decide I just want to level with the skill that I'm going to finish with, you can do it. You're probably adding half an hour onto your playthrough because your clear is slower, but your single target is good. I had no problem getting through the first 3 labs on pretty mediocre gear, which I sometimes struggle with if I'm in a Lightning Arrow or Rain of Arrows setup. What I also decided to do, which was a comment in one of my videos, was to try Storm Rain in my ballistas, and that worked really well. I felt it gave much better single target on bosses than any of the other gems. One thing I wanted to try, but I never got the links, is I wanted to put Focus Ballista in with my Storm Rain, and then I wanted to get an Enduring Mana Flask that I could use for my Tornado Shot. And then when bosses are coming up or they're in immune phases, I can basically fire, and my totems are going to fire those Storm Rains anyway because they fire when you fire, and they fire much quicker, so that when the boss actually spawns, you've already got like 40 to 50 arrows in the ground, and then you can already start doing some decent sustained DPS. Didn't ever get the right colors, but it's something I'm going to try when we head into mats. In terms of a guard skill, I didn't run one. You could run Steel Skin if you want. It's the only one that's going to be any good, but I just decided against it. If you want more DPS, you get some Vile Gems. You could try and Vile a Haste to give you a bit of burst DPS at bossing. But that's about it. It's a really, really straightforward leveling in terms of skills. Once you've got your skills set up from Act 4 or 5, you don't need to change them. You might want to maybe swap your movement skill, which will be something like Blink Arrow, for Flame Dash because it's a bit more comfortable. But really, you're not going to be making any other changes. So I'm just going to quickly go through the Atlas tree and how I would recommend progressing that pathing. So you're going to path through projectile nodes at the very beginning towards ballistics, then path through Aspect of the Eagle, and then the damage nodes on the way to Aspect of the Lynx. Next, you're going to path through Primal Spirit to Finesse, and then if you want, back up to Heart of Oak to get a bit of life. From here, you want to path to Intuition through Quick Step, and then head straight for Precise Technique. Here, you want to also pick up Farsight and Point Blank. Take the mastery that makes projectile speed with bows applied to damage, because then it allows us to run quivers or bows with increased prod speed, and it also gives us increased damage. It's just nice for 1 point. From here, we're going to go up to the right, path through Herbalism, and then take Acuity and Master Fletcher. If you need help with accuracy, there's a couple of nodes here that can help out. There's a mastery that gives accuracy per dex, which you can take in the accuracy mastery. And there is a bow one that gives you accuracy per green socket on your bow. You shouldn't really have any problems if you run into precision, but just in case you do, you've got these 2 masteries to help you out. And then from here, it's a lot of travel straight up to get some leech and life. It just makes it a bit easier because you're going to start to really hate having to use a mana flask. Getting some leech and mana and life on hit just makes it much more comfy. And at this point, I normally drop my mana flask. And then from here, we go and complete all of the travel nodes at the bottom and then respec the ones at the top. We're going to take Primeval Force. Just make sure you travel to the left-hand side and pick up the chance to apply Ele ailments rather than Ele ailment effect, because we don't apply any ailments at the moment because we can't crit. If we path to the left, it means you will actually shock and chill enemies if you have lightning and cold damage on your gear. What we could do now is complete the life wheel to the left-hand side and then just respec the unneeded travel point. Now we're going to start traveling up and getting some mana reservation. Once you've completed that wheel, then go across, get your life and evasion wheel along with the Grace Mastery, and then go and pick up your Ellie wheel. And if you want to, which I would recommend because you might be struggling, is pick up the 15% to all resistances. It just helps because you're going to be very close now to the point where you finish in Act 10 and you're going to get your drop in your resistances. And then from here, we're going to pick up all the spell suppression we can. You can also pick up the 12% mastery if you've got evasion on your helmet, gloves, and boots. And this will basically make your spell suppression capped when you're at full life. I like to run a flask that adds 10% just to make sure that even when I'm not on full life, I'm spell suppression capped, but that's up to you. And then the last 3 points, which should take you up to level 68 if my maths is correct, will give you some more prod speed, which means more damage. So this should be what your end tree looks like at 68. I wouldn't recommend deviating from it. It works really well. I've practiced lots of leagues in a row with this tree and it's always done me good. Only thing I will say is you can see from the gameplay that I don't worry too much about life on gear, and if I die when I'm leveling, I die. It really doesn't matter. As long as I'm not like dying 4 or 5 times in a zone, I'm really not that bothered. So you just have to be comfortable that you might take the odd death. However, once you get to maps and you've got Grace up and running, as long as you're at, I would say, 2.5k live for T1 maps, you should be fine. You might get the odd death to a one shot from a horrible combination of rare mods. But with Arch Nemesis going in the next league, you hopefully shouldn't get those horrible combinations that are sometimes causing problems in early maps. So gearing is really, really straightforward. You just want life and resistances on everything. I would recommend a heavy belt to get some strength, and then try and get an Agarth amulet with int and strength, because they're the two attributes you're going to struggle with because we pick up very little on the tree. Your quiver, I'd recommend a feathered arrow quiver. Reason is we're taking a mastery that turns the speed into extra damage, so you're just getting double dipping basically from any projectile speed. And for your quiver, this is the one item where I'd say forget about life, forget about resistances. This is where you want damage. You can get like 20% more damage from having a decent quiver. You've got access to projectile speed, flat ele damage, percentage ele damage, damage with bows, attack speed. There's lots and lots of good mods you can get on a quiver. So I would make sure that item is always free, that you don't need to put life and resistances into it. For your bow, you ideally, at some point going into Act 6, want to have a bow with, I would say, T6 of one ele roll and T6 of another. That's kind of perfect. That's what I ran with, and it took me all the way through the campaign, and it's going to be the bow that I tackle early maps with. It's a trash bow. You could probably, if you're in trade, buy one for like 1 alc or 1c. It's not very good. I personally wouldn't waste money on it because you're going to be dumping it early on in the maps anyway. If you don't have any joy with essence crafting and alchemy crafting, if you've picked up a regal or two, you can try alteration spamming, then regal, then craft. That's actually how I made this bow. It already had a T6 lightning. I then regaled it and hit T6 fire, and then I crafted the attack speed. But save your essences, alchemies, anything for your bows. Don't worry about going into maps with no essences and no outs. Getting that bow is super, super important because we're playing an attack build, and all your attack damage revolves around your bow. We're obviously speccing to do elemental damage, so if you've just got a bow with no ele damage on it, you are going to really, really struggle with damage. So it's really important to do it that way. That's kind of it for the skills, the leveling, and the items. I'll just talk about how I felt the progression went, because I swapped to Tornado Shot at level 38 as soon as I got GMP. Would I say it's a bad thing to do? No, not really. I lost a little bit of time going Tornado Shot. But it just means I don't have to worry about respecing for the rest of the playthrough. I just add links to my gear and upgrade my gear as I go along. In terms of speed, it wasn't particularly quick, but it was pretty decent considering I was using a skill that doesn't clear very well without support. So I was 6 hours 15 to get through the campaign and all 3 labs, but that did include about 45 minutes foothill farming to get syndicate members booted out, so that once I go into maps, I've got a chance of grinding for Elrion jewelry, which is massively important. And then probably the Gravicious chest craft, because I don't plan on having any armor, is also really important. And I spent a little bit of time farming blood aqueducts because I desperately needed upgrades. I had 0 luck in this run. I think I died about 8 times in the first 5 acts because I was running without resistances for about the first 4 acts because I just couldn't get gear to drop. I didn't want to stop and farm for gear. I'd rather just plow on, and if I die, I die. So that's kind of it for this rushed video. There'll be a POB in the description with the gear I ended the campaign with. There'll be notes with what you want to look for and gear as you progress, and then I'll set up the skills so that it's got act by act what you should add into the links as you go along, and then the skill tree will also be split up act by act. The next video is going to be mapping. This is obviously SSF, so it might be not much happens because essentially I need to grind because I need to get at least a 5 link, I need to get some essences, so it might be grinding lower tier maps for a while, but it should be out in the next few days. So until then, thank you very much for watching. Take care and see you in the next video.